Following the Galactic Empire's assassination of Commander Abigail Hayes, the galaxy didn't immediately burn. Making their first and gravest mistake, the Empire watched as humanity neither screamed nor declared war. Going dead silent instead, 10 billion humans activated a Doomsday protocol, so terrifying it forced their enemies to beg for a peace pact that endured for 9 centuries. The diplomatic station Aegis hung in the void above the gas giant Tenebris like a fragile glass ornament, a neutral ground designed to bridge the chasm between the Terran coalition and the sprawling, ancient Galactic Empire. For 6 months, negotiations had dragged on. The Empire, a massive hegemony ruled by sovereign Arthur, operated on a simple philosophy: assimilation or annihilation. Humanity, relatively new to the galactic stage but stubbornly unyielding, had presented a third option: coexistence. Commander Abigail Hayes was the architect of that third option. At 42, Hayes was a veteran of serious campaigns, a brilliant tactician who had traded her combat armor for the crisp charcoal gray dress uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. She sat at the long obsidian table, her posture impeccably straight, her eyes locked on Ambassador Desmond, the Empire's chief negotiator. The Universal Translation Matrix had assigned Desmond a westernized name and title to accommodate human neural linguistics. But there was nothing human about the towering, heavily armored diplomat. His skin was the color of bruised iron, his eyes completely black. "The Sovereign's patience is not infinite, Commander Hayes," Desmond rumbled, his voice vibrating through the deck plates. "You cling to these Geneva Accords and ancient treaties as if they hold weight against a fleet of 10,000 dreadnoughts. The Empire offers you integration as a vassal state. You offer us trade agreements. We offer you a border, Ambassador," Hayes replied, her voice smooth, betraying none of the exhaustion she felt. "We offer you a line on the map that your dreadnoughts do not cross, and in exchange, you get access to our agricultural yields, our quantum folding drives, and peace. It's a pragmatic arrangement. The remnants of the old United Nations Security Council have authorized me to sign the treaty today. If we walk away from this table, the offer is rescinded." Desmond leaned forward, his massive hands resting on the table. "You presume much, little ape. You presume you have a choice." Behind Desmond stood a retinue of Imperial Royal Guards clad in kinetic-absorbing armor and clutching plasma carbines. Behind Hayes stood 2 human Marines, perfectly still, their standard-issue ballistic rifles resting across their chests. The room was thick with the silent hum of life support and the crushing weight of history. "I don't presume anything, Ambassador. I rely on data," she said, tapping the glass data pad in front of her. "Our deep space telemetry routed through the Lockheed Martin surveillance arrays in the Orion Cygnus arm shows your supply lines are stretched thin. You are fighting a war of attrition on your eastern border against the hive minds. You cannot afford a two-front war. Not with us." Desmond's eyes narrowed. She had struck a nerve. The Empire's vulnerability was a closely guarded state secret. To have it thrown back in his face by a species that had barely cracked faster-than-light travel 3 centuries ago was an intolerable insult. What happened next would be analyzed frame by frame in military academies for the next 900 years. It was not Desmond who acted, but a zealot within his guard, a faction loyal to the Empire's expansionist military caste who believed peace with humans was heresy. Without an order, the guard raised his plasma carbine and fired. The superheated bolt of ionized gas crossed the table in a fraction of a millisecond. It struck Commander Hayes directly in the chest. The kinetic force threw her violently backward out of her chair. Her body hit the deck with a sickening crack. The smell of ozone and seared flesh instantly filled the sterile air of the diplomatic chamber. For one agonizing second, time seemed to stop. Desmond froze, horror flashing across his alien features. Realizing the catastrophic diplomatic breach that had just occurred, he turned to bark an order at his rogue guard. But before the words could leave his mouth, he looked back at the human delegation, bracing for the inevitable retaliation. He expected the 2 human Marines to open fire. He expected chaos, screaming, panic, and the sudden violent eruption of war. Instead, there was absolute terrifying silence. The 2 human Marines did not raise their weapons. They did not scream. They didn't even look at the Imperial Guard who had just assassinated their commander. Their eyes were fixed on the tactical displays embedded in their visors. One Marine knelt beside Hayes, calmly pressing a localized stasis field generator to her catastrophic chest wound. The other Marine stepped forward, looked Desmond dead in the eyes, and spoke in a voice devoid of all emotion. The Terran Coalition acknowledges the termination of diplomatic dialogue. We are departing. Wait, Desmond stammered, entirely off balance. This was an unauthorized action. The guard will be executed. Commander Hayes. Commander Hayes is clinically deceased. Her heart has stopped, the Marine said, his voice as cold as deep space. He hoisted her limp, bleeding body over his shoulder effortlessly. The treaty is void. Without another word, the humans turned and walked out of the chamber. They didn't run. They didn't look back. They left the data pads, the treaty documents, and a pool of Abigail Hayes's blood on the floor. Desmond stood in the silent room, a creeping dread washing over him. He had spent decades conquering emotional, volatile species. He knew what the drums of war sounded like. He knew the furious roars of a wronged people. This cold, mechanical silence was something entirely new, and it terrified him. Within an hour of the shooting, the human flagship Endurance, an ugly, brutalist wedge of titanium and depleted uranium, detached from the station's umbilical. The Empire's dreadnoughts, floating menacingly in the distance, locked their targeting lasers onto the human vessel, awaiting the order to turn it into slag. "Do we fire, Ambassador?" the Imperial Fleet Commander asked over the comms. "No," Desmond replied, staring at the telemetry screens in his private quarters on the station. "Let them go. Monitor their comms. I want to hear their distress calls. I want to hear their high command screaming for our blood. We need to measure their response to prepare our vanguard." But the comms officers reported nothing. "What do you mean, nothing?" Desmond demanded. "Complete silence, Ambassador," the comms officer replied, confusion bleeding into his tone. "No encrypted bursts, no distress signals. The Endurance just engaged its quantum-fold drive and vanished. And, sir, we are losing our feeds from the Terran border." "Losing feeds? Are they jamming us?" "No, sir, they aren't jamming us. They are shutting down." Across the Orion Cygnus arm, humanity was going dark. The massive civilian trade hubs, the booming orbital shipyards of Mars, the continuous, noisy stream of cultural broadcasts that the Empire usually found so irritating. All of it ceased. Trillions of terabytes of data flow dropped to absolute zero. The massive deep space communication arrays built by DARPA and SpaceX centuries ago to knit the human worlds together abruptly ceased all transmissions. It was as if a galactic circuit breaker had been tripped. The Terran Coalition didn't just stop talking to the Empire. They stopped talking to each other. Deep in the heart of Terran space, in a subterranean bunker beneath the irradiated ruins of old Earth's North American continent, Admiral David Trenton watched a holographic map of human space turn completely red. Trenton was a man who looked like he was carved from old oak, weathered and grim. He stood in the center of the command nexus, surrounded by technicians who were working in an eerie, disciplined silence. "Vital signs on Commander Hayes?" Trenton asked quietly. "Flatlined for exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Admiral," Dr. William Carter reported from the medical console. "They have her in a localized stasis field aboard the Endurance, but her biological functions ceased at 142 standard time. Neural degradation is paused, but she is, by all medical definitions, dead." Trenton closed his eyes and let out a slow, measured breath. "God help us." He turned to the main console. "Initiate the Petrov failsafe. Unlock the dead hand." "Sir," his second-in-command, a young officer named Lieutenant Pierce, hesitated for a fraction of a second. "The Petrov failsafe requires a dual-key turn. Are we certain the Empire intended this as an act of war?" Lieutenant Commander Hayes's heart stopped. "That was the only trigger the protocol recognized," Trenton said, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Turn the key. To understand the terror of the dead hand, One had to look back centuries to the Cold War of old Earth. Specifically, to a man named Stanislav Petrov and the Soviet Union's perimeter system, a doomsday machine designed to automatically launch nuclear missiles if the Soviet leadership was wiped out. Humanity had carried that paranoid psychology to the stars. But they hadn't built nuclear missiles. That was child's play. Humanity had secretly built the Oppenheimer network. Commander Abigail Hayes wasn't just a diplomat. She was the foremost quantum engineer of her generation. She had spent the last decade secretly overseeing the construction of thousands of stealth-cloaked satellites positioned in close orbit around the Empire's core stars. They were stellar mass disruptors. If activated, they would induce artificial supernovas, turning the Empire's own suns into planet-killing weapons. The network was highly illegal, highly immoral, and fundamentally uncontrollable once armed. To prevent a rogue human general from ever using it offensively, the system required a biological tether. It was tied directly to Hayes's biometric telemetry. As long as her heartbeat continued, the system slept. If she was killed, the system assumed a decapitation strike against human leadership had occurred. It armed automatically, and now a countdown had begun. Back on the station Aegis, Ambassador Desmond was abruptly thrown against the bulkhead as emergency sirens screamed to life. The lights flickered, casting blood-red shadows across the corridors. He scrambled to the command center. Status report. Are the humans attacking? No, Ambassador. The sensor chief stammered, his tentacles trembling over the console. It's the stars. All of them. Clarify, Desmond roared. We are detecting massive gravitational anomalies in the corona of our home system's sun and the suns of the nearest 40 imperial agricultural worlds. Something has decloaked in low stellar orbit. They are projecting localized gravity wells into the core of the stars. The stellar mass is destabilizing. Desmond stared at the telemetry. How long? If the gravity wells continue to expand at this rate, our home-world sun will go supernova in exactly 48 standard hours. Ambassador, our entire core empire will burn. The empire had 10,000 dreadnoughts. They had legions of genetically enhanced supersoldiers. They had plasma weapons that could crack a planet's crust. But you cannot shoot a gravity well. You cannot arrest a supernova. Desmond felt his knees give out. He slumped into the command chair. The humans hadn't declared war because they didn't need to. They didn't care about skirmishes or honor or battlefield glory. They had looked at the brutal mathematics of galactic conflict and preemptively rigged the chessboard to explode. Get me Sovereign Arthur, Desmond whispered, his voice trembling. Get me the Sovereign right now. The Sovereign's holographic projection flickered into the war room of the imperial capital. A titan of a man adorned in gold and crimson ceremonial armor. Sovereign Arthur had ruled the Galactic Empire for a century, crushing rebellions with an iron fist. But as he looked at the telemetry data presented by Desmond, his face went ashen. You allowed a Terran diplomat to be assassinated on neutral ground, and in response, the apes have initiated a stellar execution of our civilization. The Sovereign's voice was a dangerously quiet hiss. My lord, it was a rogue element in the guard. The humans. Desmond swallowed hard. They are entirely unresponsive. Our subspace hails are bouncing back. They have completely severed all communications. They are waiting for us to die. Find a way to stop it, Sovereign Arthur commanded. Order the fleet to destroy those satellites. We tried, my lord. The satellites are shielded by quantum-fold barriers. Our weapons pass right through them. They exist slightly out of phase with our reality. We can't touch them. For the first time in his life, the Sovereign felt the cold grip of absolute helplessness. Humanity had weaponized physics in a way the Empire's brute force scientists had never imagined. On the human side, the Endurance dropped out of quantum-fold space deep within a heavily fortified Terran nebula. The ship was immediately surrounded by an escort of 50 heavy cruisers. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Carter worked frantically. Commander Hayes was floating inside a cylindrical stasis pod, bathed in a pale blue light. Admiral Trenton stood by the glass, his hands clasped behind his back. Status, Doctor. The localized stasis field preserved her brain function in the crucial seconds after the shot, Dr. Carter explained, pulling up a holographic scan of her chest. The plasma bolt incinerated her sternum, right lung, and completely vaporized her heart. We have her hooked up to an artificial cardiopulmonary bypass, and we've managed to restart a synthetic pulse. Did it stop the countdown? Trenton asked. Carter shook his head grimly. No, the dead hand system is too smart. It recognizes the synthetic pulse as an artificial intervention. It requires her unique neural electric signature, conscious brain activity, to authorize a stand-down order. She has to wake up, Admiral. If she doesn't wake up and consciously input the abort code, the Oppenheimer network will detonate the Imperial stars in 46 hours. Trenton stared at Hayes's pale, lifeless face. Can you wake her up with a vaporized cardiovascular system? No. Even with our best technology, growing a cloned heart and reconstructing her pulmonary system will take weeks. We don't have weeks. We have hours. Carter hesitated. Admiral, there is only one civilization in the galaxy with the biological rapid regeneration technology capable of repairing this kind of trauma in under a day. Trenton's eyes narrowed. The Empire. Yes, the Valyrian Imperial Medical Caste. They use accelerated bioforges to heal their elite soldiers on the battlefield. If we had their technology, we could save her, and she could stop the countdown. The brutal irony of the situation settled over the room like a lead blanket. The humans had built a doomsday weapon to destroy the Empire. The Empire had accidentally triggered it by killing the only person who could turn it off. And now, the only way to save the Empire was for the Empire to save the very human they had just murdered. Trenton walked to the secure communications console. For the first time since the shooting, he opened a single encrypted subspace channel directly to the Imperial capital. On the Imperial throne world, Sovereign Arthur and Ambassador Desmond watched as the main screen flickered to life. Instead of the chaotic, terrified human leaders they expected, they saw the stoic, unyielding face of Admiral David Trenton. "This is Admiral Trenton of the Terran Coalition," he said, his voice echoing in the grand halls of the Empire. "I am broadcasting on a one-way channel. You will listen." Sovereign Arthur stood up, his pride warring with his desperation. "Admiral, your weapon is a violation of every law of civilized warfare. Stand it down immediately or we will." "You will do nothing," Trenton interrupted, a feat that caused the Imperial guards in the room to gasp at the sheer audacity. "You do not have a move left on this board, Sovereign. You killed Commander Hayes. In doing so, you activated a dead man's switch tied to her biometric signature. The Terran Coalition is not actively attacking you. We are simply letting the system you triggered run its course." Desmond stepped forward. "Admiral, it was a rogue guard. We did not sanction her death. Surely you do not intend to slaughter trillions of innocents for the actions of one extremist." "Intent is irrelevant," Trenton said coldly. "The countdown cannot be aborted by me, or the Terran Senate, or anyone else. It requires Commander Hayes's conscious, neural authorization to stand down. Then have her input the code." Sovereign Arthur demanded. "She is clinically dead, Sovereign. Her heart was vaporized by your weapon." Trenton leaned closer to the camera. "We have her on life support, but Terran medical science cannot repair the damage in time. The countdown hits 0 in 45 hours and 20 minutes. The silence in the Imperial throne room was absolute. However, Trenton continued. "Our intelligence files provided by the Lockheed Deep Space Reconnaissance Wing indicate that your royal bioforges can rapidly synthesize and integrate complex organ structures in a matter of hours. We are transmitting the coordinates of a neutral sector in the void. You have exactly 10 hours to arrive with your best medical ship, your highest-ranking surgeons, and your bioforge technology. You will board our flagship. You will rebuild Commander Hayes. You will bring her back to life." Trenton paused, letting the weight of his words crush the Sovereign's remaining pride. "If she wakes up, and if she chooses to forgive you, she will stop the countdown. If you fail or if you refuse, the Terran Coalition will mourn our commander, and we will watch your empire burn." Trenton out. The transmission cut to black. Sovereign Arthur slowly sank back into his throne. The most powerful ruler in the known universe, commander of 10,000 warships, had just been reduced to an errand boy by a species that hadn't even discovered FTL travel until the 22nd century. "Ambassador," Arthur whispered, his voice stripped of all its former arrogance. "Yes, my lord. Requisition the Royal Medical Frigate. Awaken High Surgeon Vanter and pack the Bioforge." The sovereign looked down at his trembling hands. "We are going to save humanity's commander because if we don't, the apes will kill the stars." The rendezvous point was a lifeless patch of interstellar vacuum designated Sector 7G, a void completely devoid of starlight. When the Imperial Royal Medical Frigate dropped out of subspace, it did not arrive with the usual pomp and armada of escorts. It came alone, a sleek silver teardrop completely dwarfed by the angular, heavily armored bulk of the human flagship, Endurance. Aboard the Endurance, Admiral David Trenton watched the docking sequence through the reinforced viewport of the hangar deck. Beside him stood a phalanx of heavily armed human marines. The airlock hissed, cycling the atmospheric pressures, and the heavy blast doors slid apart. Sovereign Arthur, absolute ruler of 1,000,000,000,000 souls, stepped onto human decking. He wore no ceremonial armor today, only the muted gray robes of an imperial penitent. Flanking him was Ambassador Desmond and a tall, severely thin alien, whose translation matrix identified him as Chief Surgeon Alistair. Trailing behind them, a team of Imperial technicians pushed a massive, humming cylindrical device, the Royal Bioforge. Trenton did not salute. He did not offer his hand. He simply checked his chronometer. "You are 20 minutes late, Sovereign," Trenton said, his voice echoing off the cold titanium bulkheads. "The countdown is currently at 8 hours and 15 minutes. If your machine takes longer than that, we all burn together." Arthur swallowed his pride, a visibly painful gesture for a man treated as a living god. "Surgeon Alistair assures me the bioreconstruction will take no more than 6 hours. Admiral, we are ready." "Then follow me," Trenton commanded, turning on his heel. The Imperial delegation was escorted through the labyrinthine corridors of the Endurance for 21 minutes and 46 seconds. Sovereign Arthur took note of the ship's interior. There were no gilded halls, no statues of conquerors. It was all exposed wiring, reinforced bulkheads, and warning labels printed in blocky English text. It was a machine built strictly for survival. Terrified him more than any dreadnought. In the primary medical bay, Dr. William Carter and his team from the Mayo Clinic's Galactic Outpost were already prepping the surgical theater. Commander Abigail Hayes lay suspended in the Seaman's health stasis field. Her body was a pale, tragic canvas of catastrophic trauma. The right side of her chest was a cavernous, charred ruin. Surgeon Alistair approached the stasis pod, his dark eyes scanning the biometric readouts on the human monitors. He tapped his long fingers against the glass. "Fascinating," Alistair muttered, his translated voice synthesized into a crisp, clipped British accent. "Your stasis technology is remarkably primitive, essentially freezing molecular vibration through sheer electromagnetic force. Yet, it successfully prevented total cellular necrosis. However, the trauma is extensive. The plasma bolt vaporized the sternum, the right lung, the primary myocardium, and the aortic arch. Can your forge fix it or not?" Trenton demanded, stepping into the room. "The bioforge does not merely fix, Admiral," Alistair replied, signaling his technicians to deploy the machine. "It rebuilds. We will extract a sample of the commander's intact DNA from her bone marrow. The forge will rapidly sequence and synthesize adult stem cells, forcefully differentiating them into cardiac and pulmonary tissues. We will literally print a new heart and lung directly into her chest cavity, binding the cellular matrices with biopolymers." Dr. Carter frowned, crossing his arms. "And what about tissue rejection? The human immune system is aggressively territorial. If you introduce alien polymers into her bloodstream, her white blood cells will tear the new organs apart before she even takes a breath. That is where your primitive medicine must assist us," Alistair said, locking the bioforge over Hayes's shattered chest. You must suppress her immune system entirely. Shut it down to 0. If she fights our polymers, she dies. Dr. Carter nodded grimly to his lead nurse, a woman named Sarah. Get the Pfizer-Novartis immunosuppressant cocktail, Gamma-4. Flood her system. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in agonizing tension. The medical bay became a battleground where human pharmacology and imperial bioengineering fought to pull Abigail Hayes back from the precipice of death. The bioforge was a terrifying machine to witness. It extended microscopic, glowing tendrils into Hayes's chest, spinning a lattice of raw, pulsing biological matter. Inch by inch, a new heart began to form, raw and red, woven from her own accelerated genetic material. Beside it, the spongy pink mass of a new lung expanded to fill the void left by the plasma bolt. In the corner of the room, Sovereign Arthur sat in a folding metal chair, his head in his hands. The supreme ruler of the galaxy was watching a human heart being rebuilt, knowing that every microscopic artery being formed was the only thing standing between his empire and absolute annihilation. Countdown at 2 hours, 30 minutes. Lieutenant Pierce announced over the intercom, his voice tight. Telemetry from the Oppenheimer network confirms the gravity wells are expanding. The Imperial home sun is experiencing extreme solar flares. Surface temperatures on their core worlds have risen by 4 degrees. Arthur flinched. 4 degrees meant the oceans on his home world were beginning to boil. We are encountering a complication, Surgeon Alistair suddenly announced, his hands flying across the holographic interface of the bioforge. Alarms began to blare in the medical bay. Her blood pressure is plummeting, Dr. Carter shouted, rushing to the Siemens monitors. The synthetic pulse is failing. What did you do? It is not the forge. It is her neurology, Alistair countered, his tentacles twitching in panic. The human brain is rejecting the neural pathways of the new heart. The biopolymers are failing to conduct the electrical signals from her brainstem. She needs a shock, Carter said. We have to force the sinoatrial node to fire manually. Sarah, charge the defibrillators. Do not use electrical current, Alistair yelled. The biopolymers are still setting. High voltage will liquefy the new ventricles. If we don't shock her, her brain dies from oxygen starvation in 3 minutes, and your stars explode in 2 hours. Trenton roared, stepping into the fray. Shock her, Carter. Charging to 200 joules, Sarah called out, pressing the heavy paddles to the edges of the newly synthesized flesh. Clear. Her body convulsed violently on the table. The heart monitor let out a continuous flat shriek. Nothing. Carter gritted his teeth. Charge to 300. Arthur stood up, his eyes wide with sheer terror. Please, the Sovereign whispered to a god he no longer believed in. Please. Clear. Another violent jolt. The flat line continued for 3 agonizing seconds. And then, a blip. Beep. Alistair stared at his screens. The biopolymers held. The neural bridge is forming. Beep. 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 The rhythm was erratic. Then slowly, steadily, it began to stabilize. The bioforge retracted its tendrils, sealing the dermal layers of her chest with a flawless synthetic scar. The anatomical reconstruction is complete, Alistair said, wiping a viscous sweat from his brow. She is whole. But she's still in a coma, Dr. Carter observed, checking her pupil dilation. The dead hand system requires conscious cognitive input. Admiral, she has to wake up and speak the abort code. Trenton looked at the clock. 1 hour and 15 minutes. Flush the anesthetics. Pump her full of adrenaline. Wake her up. The transition from clinical death back to waking consciousness is not a peaceful one. It is a violent, burning plunge back into the realm of the living. Abigail Hayes's eyes snapped open. She gasped, a ragged, desperate intake of air filling a lung that hadn't existed 6 hours ago. She immediately convulsed, arching her back as white-hot pain flared through her chest. Hold her down, Carter ordered as nurses rushed to secure her limbs. Commander Hayes, look at me. You are safe. You are on the Endurance. Hayes thrashed, her eyes wild, darting around the room. She saw the sterile metal of the human medbay, the grim face of Admiral Trenton, and then, inexplicably, the towering, terrified figure of Sovereign Arthur standing in the corner. Memory rushed back like a breaking dam. The diplomatic table, Ambassador Desmond, the blinding flash of the plasma bolt, the crushing darkness. "The treaty," she rasped, her voice sounding like grinding glass. She coughed, tasting copper. "Commander." Trenton stepped forward, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "Listen to me very carefully. You were killed. Your heart stopped. The Petrov failsafe activated." Hayes froze. The frantic monitors tracking her heart rate spiked. She knew exactly what the failsafe was. She had designed the physics behind it. "How long?" she whispered. 42 minutes until stellar ignition," Trenton replied. "The Oppenheimer network is fully armed. The gravity wells are locked onto the core Imperial stars. Sovereign Arthur and his medical team brought the technology to revive you. But the system needs your voice, Abigail. It needs your authorization to stand down." Sovereign Arthur took a step forward, dropping to one knee beside the medical bed. The ruler of a trillion beings bowed his head to a single battered human woman. "Commander Hayes," Arthur pleaded, his voice trembling, "I beg you." "It was a rogue extremist. The guard has been executed. Our empire did not sanction your assassination. Trillions of innocent lives, children, entire ecosystems. They will burn in less than an hour. Please give the abort code." Hayes lay back against the pillows, her breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. She looked at the new, jagged scar running down the center of her chest. She felt the heavy, unfamiliar beat of a heart that was not entirely hers. She looked at Arthur. Then she looked at Trenton. "No," Hayes whispered. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the steady mechanical beep of her life support. Arthur's face drained of all color. "What? What do you mean?" "No, we saved you. You cannot commit genocide." "I am not committing genocide, Sovereign," Hayes said, her voice gaining a fraction of its former diplomatic steel. "I am enforcing peace, but the old treaty is dead, just like I was." She turned her gaze to Dr. Carter. "Doctor, give me a datapad and an uplink to the Imperial mainframe." Carter hurriedly handed her a glass tablet. Hayes's fingers, though trembling, moved with practiced precision across the screen. She wasn't inputting an abort code. She was writing. "You wanted integration, Sovereign?" Hayes said. Her eyes locked onto the tablet. "You believed the Empire could simply absorb humanity because you viewed us as weak. You pushed us to the table with a gun to our heads. Then you pulled the trigger." "It was a mistake," Arthur cried, eyeing the countdown clock on the wall. 38 minutes, and this is the consequence," Hayes replied coldly. "I am not disarming the Oppenheimer network." Trenton raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. He trusted her completely. "I am rewriting the targeting protocols," Hayes explained, her voice echoing in the tense silence of the medbay. "The dead hand will no longer be tied exclusively to my biometric signature. I am linking it to a quantum AI matrix housed deep within Earth's core. The network will remain cloaked in orbit around your stars permanently." Arthur stood up, outrage warring with terror. "You are holding a gun to the head of my entire civilization forever." "Yes," Hayes said simply. "This is the new treaty, Sovereign, the Pax Tana. If an Imperial warship ever fires upon a human vessel unprovoked, the AI will detonate your sons. If an Imperial army crosses into human space, the AI will detonate your sons. If you attempt to dismantle the satellites, the AI will detonate your sons." She finished typing and handed the datapad to Arthur. "We don't want to conquer you. We don't want your territory. We just want to be left alone to chart our own path in the dark. You respect our borders and your stars continue to shine. You cross them and your empire ends." Arthur stared at the glowing document. It was the ultimate humiliation. The Galactic Empire reduced to a permanent hostage state by an upstart species of primate engineers. "You are monsters," Arthur whispered. "No," Hayes replied softly. "We are survivors and we learn from our history. Mutually assured destruction kept our species from wiping itself out during our atomic age. Now it's going to keep the galaxy in one piece. She pointed to the bottom of the screen. Sign it, Sovereign. Digitally encode your genetic signature into the pact, or we can sit here and wait 30 minutes for the fireworks. Arthur's hands shook uncontrollably. He looked at Desmond, who gave a slow, defeated nod. He looked at the countdown clock. 29 minutes. With a heavy, ragged sigh, Sovereign Arthur pressed his thumb to the data pad, encoding his biosignature. The tablet chimed, acknowledging the ultimate surrender of the Galactic Empire. Hayes took the pad back. She closed her eyes, tapping into the secure comms link buried in her neural implant. This is Commander Abigail Hayes. She spoke into the silent void of subspace, her voice transmitting directly to the hidden relays of the Oppenheimer network. Authorization code, Trinity Prometheus Echo. Stand down. Failsafe. Retract gravity wells. Enter dormant overwatch mode. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then Lieutenant Pierce's voice crackled over the intercom, thick with relief. Admiral, telemetry confirms. The gravity wells are collapsing. The stellar masses are stabilizing. The satellites have re-engaged quantum cloaking. The countdown has stopped. Arthur collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands, weeping openly. Abigail Hayes let her head fall back against the pillow, the adrenaline finally leaving her system, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She had died today, but she had also rewritten the fate of the cosmos. The Galactic Empire never fired another shot at humanity. The fear of the unseen planet-killing network kept the Imperial dreadnoughts firmly within their own borders. They traded with the Terran coalition. They shared technology, but they never, ever provoked them. Commander Hayes survived, retiring to a quiet life on the terraformed shores of Mars, living to the ripe old age of 112. Her chest forever carrying the alien heart that saved the universe. And for 900 years, the galaxy enjoyed the longest, most prosperous, and most terrified era of absolute peace it had ever known. Because every time the Empire looked up at their stars, they remembered that humanity was holding the detonator. Wow, what a wild ride. If you loved this HFY story of humanity turning the ultimate tragedy into a terrifyingly brilliant checkmate, smash that like button. What did you think of Commander Hayes' final savage ultimatum? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans and subscribe to the channel for more epic tales of humanity showing the galaxy exactly why we are not to be messed with. See you in the next one.